Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, live today on Thursday, June the 27th, bringing you guys another episode, this time centered around some discussions that I wanted to bring up. A lot of opinionated thoughts that I wanted to bring to you today on some of the recent news around the NFL, starting with the job security of Todd Bowles after back-to-back division titles. Should he be on the hot seat heading into 2024? Some believe that he could be. I'll give you all the reasons why. Then we're going to get into some more NFL offseason grades in the NFC West this time. A lot of movement, a lot of improving with some of these teams, but are they at the level to compete right away in this year? Then another discussion topic, should Kyler Murray, is he capable of being in MVP talks now that he has a full healthy offseason heading into this year with some more help on the offensive side of the ball? Is he capable of being at least in the conversation for MVP? Those topics and more coming up on today's show. Before I get started, a reminder to you guys, if you have any link that you see on your screen, I'm able to see your question or comment and acknowledge it, read it on air, and that way get a good gauge of what you guys are thinking about to anything I say or any of the topics on hand on today's show. So please, if you would, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a big help for the show and the network as well. But as we get started here with the first topic on today's show, should Todd Bowles be on the hot seat? It's a weird question when I first came across this topic, some of the news surrounding this idea, because Todd Bowles has only been the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers since 2022. He was hired in March, I want to say, and since that time he won the NFC division title in 2022 in his first year, albeit with an 8-9 record. It tells you a lot about that division to win it with a losing record, but regardless of that, he won it. Then this past year, not too much of an improvement record-wise. He finished 9-8, and they made it into that wild card round they were hosting because they obviously won the division, and they had a really impressive 32-9 win off of that win against the Eagles. They move on to play the Lions, and although they got eliminated, they made it close there towards the end. But none of that really screams like Todd Bowles should be on the hot seat, right? I can't be the only one thinking about that, but Bucs insider Ira Kaufman provided an update on Todd Bowles' job security, what is being said, and where all these ideas and rumors are sort of starting to come up around Todd Bowles. I actually have the quote here for you guys to also check it out. Ira Kaufman basically said, despite 2 NFC titles and a lopsided playoff victory, Bowles has yet to win over the bulk of Bucs Nation. Skeptics point out that Tampa Bay is 18-19 on his watch, including the playoffs, and once a prolific attack has turned pedestrian. And also, Ira Kaufman mentioned that the new offensive coordinator, after they moved on from Dave Canales, or Dave Canales moved on from them to take the Carolina Panthers head coaching job, their new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, his success could have a lot to do with how Todd Bowles is viewed, because it seems like obviously from this statement that the offense is a major, questioning, a doubtful point from a lot of Bucs fans and just Bucs Nation overall, because it feels like they should be better than what they are. And I felt that at some points last season where it seemed like they struggled to get the running game going, and off of that, if Mike Evans wasn't having a great game, Chris Godwin really didn't look like himself as well, dealing with some injuries and that sort of things. Trey Palmer had some flashes, but again, I think he was still getting into the real groove of things and finding his way, still being a young player in the NFL. So there were some definite highs, but also some definite low points where the games got ugly, and that hasn't convinced Buccaneers Nation up until this point. But with Liam Cohen there, it seems like a lot of his success and how he makes the offense look in 2024 could be a huge determining factor in how Todd Bowles' job security goes moving forward. After an 8-9 season, a pessimistic outlook on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, because trying to make that transition from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, you could see why a lot of people were feeling not too great about it, especially with how Baker performed in the past with the Browns, moving over to the Los Angeles Rams, and struggling to find a real home, really establishing himself after being drafted number 1 overall, being a journeyman to some extent. Didn't really scream out like this season that just passed in 2023. Had a lot of promise for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that pessimistic outlook probably would have been, Bulls probably would have been fired if it didn't turn out like it did in 2023. Because you head into 2023, pessimistic outlook, no real hope, probably thinking you're going to get worse. And then you surprise everybody by winning the division again. And you can't fire Todd Bowles after you win the division again, especially by winning a playoff game, going to Detroit, having a close game there. It's hard to fire him there. So it is almost, I don't want to say unlucky or unfortunate, because I don't think Todd Bowles should be on the hot seat, just based on how I view him and how good of a job he's done in just 2 years being here. But if it would have turned out like a lot of people originally predicted, then he probably would have gotten fired. That was probably in the landscape of some thought by the organization at some point during the early portion of the season, where the Bucs sort of struggled, and then halfway through it, they finally clicked. Baker Mayfield starting playing very well, and they went on a little run there. They never relinquished the division title, and they ended up winning it in Carolina that last week, and then going into the playoffs, they had that momentum, and it turned out to be a pretty solid season in my opinion, and that's why this whole notion of Todd Bowles being on the hot seat, I don't really agree with it at all, especially, like I mentioned, because he's only been here 2 years, and that transition from Tom Brady in that era with Bruce Arians winning the Super Bowl and being a very dominant team, to then promote Todd Bowles from the defensive coordinator spot to the head coach and almost dump this on him. It wasn't all bad. Obviously, you still have some great players like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, obviously. Rachaad White played better this year. But with uncertainty at quarterback, some uncertainty on the defensive side of the ball, even though that is Todd Bowles' area of expertise, you couldn't really convince anybody to say that Todd Bowles was in an ideal spot to succeed right away, especially with how obviously important the quarterback position is. So for being there 2 years, winning back-to-back division titles, I think does hold a good amount of merit to at least buy him some time, because he has earned it. And this is still early on in the process, 2 years in. For what he has accomplished so far, I think he at least has earned the benefit of the doubt from everybody. If this offense doesn't look as exciting as a lot of people might anticipate, he has earned the time at least to have with this team, to have with a new offensive coordinator nonetheless, and try to work this out in this new year. And I mentioned the new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. Most believe that he got this role because of his good relationship with Baker Mayfield. He was the offensive coordinator back with the Los Angeles Rams in 2022, while Baker Mayfield was there in the latter portion of the season, and they had some success. I'm sure you guys remember that one crazy game that the Rams had with Baker at quarterback, and he led a very impressive drive to win the game. So their good relationship, now he gets the job here with the Bucs. So that gives me a little bit more optimism that this could be a good situation for the Bucs and not something that is just sort of thrown together and to expect something bad to happen off of it. The fact that there is an already existing relationship there between Cohen and Mayfield to be comfortable in the system that they're trying to run, and with Baker now getting more security in his new contract, it gives me a little bit more ease thinking that this could work a lot sooner than maybe a lot of people are anticipating. And you could really tell the offensive deficiencies in that game against the Detroit Lions to sort of shine some light on the opposition, sort of this argument where people are still not too convinced about Todd Bowles. You could argue that once you get into the playoffs against those really good teams like the Lions, like we saw, the 49ers, the Packers even the Eagles heading into this year, you really saw the deficiencies on offense last year, or the just lack of talent to compete with these other teams. And I get it, it isn't the prettiest picture, but they did make it close there at the end. And I was, again, giving Todd Bowles the benefit of the doubt because it seemed like it was just almost all pieced together, or they just surprised a lot of people is what I'm trying to say. They surprised a lot of people, and to even get that far with surprising people and being in a very sneakily competitive NFC, just overall as a conference, I would give Todd Bowles more credit than I think a good amount of people are. And I too also thought that it wasn't going to work out with Baker because of the fact that he was moving all over the place, didn't really convince anybody anywhere that he was at. So there is some value in that for Todd Bowles, holding out to him, putting that confidence in him to be that starting quarterback, not benching him sooner rather than just waiting it out. And you earn yourself 2 back-to-back division titles. Now Baker's sort of the face of the franchise, probably, quite frankly, with the Tampa Bay Bucks. And the records, again, in his first 2 seasons aren't glamorous for Todd Bowles, but I think he's done enough again to buy himself at least the complete 2025 season, if this next year might not be too much better, maybe around 500 again. He has earned himself at least until 2025, in my opinion, to really make a decision on him, unless it is a complete disaster and they go, I don't know, 4-13 or something, 4-14 or something like that. Then, all right, maybe you could fire him. But for that to happen, I would probably guess a major injury would have to happen for them to be that bad and have that bad of a fall off. So I can't really be on the side right now that he is on the hot seat. You know, hot seat is someone like Mike McCarthy, I guess you could throw in there. I would put Nick Sirianni in there more so over than Todd Bowles, just because of last year and how talented that team is compared to what Todd Bowles is dealing with in Tampa Bay. But from where the Bucks were in a weird time transitioning away from Tom Brady and that prosperous era, to make it as seamless as it has been through the next 2 years and still be pretty impressive on defense and put out a good product on offense to not be completely terrible, that is still valuable. I think Todd Bowles is only getting better. He's only 2 years into the job. That's really the biggest point in all of this. You can't make a decision like this right away, especially after having success the last 2 years in the division. Now, the quality of division, that is also important. Obviously, context matters, but he's been there only 2 years and has won the division. So until he proves that he can't do that, and the rest of the division gets extremely better, you have to keep him. I don't think he should be on the hot seat. And people aren't valuing enough what job he's done there for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And I'm expecting them to get a little bit better this year. New year, 3rd year now for Todd Bowles. You get all your most important pieces back. I expect them to build on it in what should be a more competitive NFC South, because at least you have the Falcons, who are really going to be good this year. I'm excited to see it. Todd Bowles is not on the hot seat, in my opinion. Let me know if you guys disagree with me or agree with some of the sentiment coming out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan base. But we're going to leave that topic there, and we're going to head into our first break of the show. But when we return, some more offseason grades so far through this offseason, this time in the NFC West, going through the Cardinals, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers to decide who had the best offseason out of those 4 teams. So we're just getting started. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into some more off-season grades in the NFC West this time, looking through this division, being the last division that I'm going to grade in the NFC before we move on to the AFC North in tomorrow's episode. I thought we would talk about them here for just a few minutes here, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals as the first team on my grading system. they did get better, technically. They did get better. It's still a very young team, but obviously the biggest improvement that they made was Marvin Harrison Jr. being drafted there with the 4th overall selection in this year's draft. I love that pick. I thought it was probably the most obvious pick in the top 10, potentially in the entire draft, maybe other than Caleb Williams. But he's going to be an instant playmaker for them, instant game changer for the Cardinals, especially with having Kyler Murray there fully healthy, a full healthy offseason to reintegrate himself in a way into this offense, now having what I believe could be a prototypical elite number 1 receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. I said it before the draft, months before the draft, that he could lace up for any team in February and March, and I wouldn't have any doubt about him, struggling with anything at the NFL level. He's going to create that much impact for the Arizona Cardinals, in my opinion. But staying on the topic of the draft and how the Cardinals improved through there, they had 12 draft picks this year in the draft, 7 of them being in the first 3 rounds. So again, emphasizing them being a young team. Through the offseason and free agency, they did add players like Jonah Williams, Zay Jones to add some experience to positions of need at the tackle position, and also adding some more playmakers around a Kyler Murray, around Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride stepped up massively last year. Getting those guys as much help as possible is massive for them. They did technically get better in that area, so I like that they did that. But realistically, talking about the Cardinals, no one is expecting them to go from 4-13 to a perennial playoff team, 500 at best, I would guess, for this team at this point. You see on your screen there, Budda Baker. They got better on offense, definitely, but on defense, there's still a lot of holes outside of Budda Baker, so I would have liked them to address that a little bit more in free agency or through the draft, but it is what it is at this situation. Most analysts and most sources project this team to be major playoff or major contenders in free agency next year, in next offseason, so they're still buying their time. They're still trying to find their footing. This is a good step in the right direction because in 2025, they have the 4th most salary cap. They have the 4th most salary cap this year in 2024 and the 2nd most in 2025. So I think everyone right now is just anticipating that year. Not that they're going to tank or anything like that. Of course, no one tanks. But they're just going to buy their time through this year, get better, get some more experience for some of their young, important players, and then next year, hopefully they can be able to go after some big name players in the market and really make a splash move in free agency to put them in a better spot than they are right now. But they are getting better, but overall, I C+ for me because they are still young. They got better, but in a young way. They didn't get anybody that you'd expect to make a massive impact right away this upcoming year. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the next team I have on my list in this division, the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, a C+ for me. I kind of debated between myself with the Seahawks, whether to get them over the edge there and give them a B-, maybe into the B range, but I couldn't get myself to do it. I actually still have B- written on my sheet here, but I changed it today to a C+ just because I didn't really see them get too much better from what they had last year. I love the hiring of Mike Macdonald from the Baltimore Ravens to be their new head coach, trying to reestablish a better defensive identity with how successful he was on the defensive side of the ball for the Baltimore Ravens. I love that idea. I love that mindset that he's going to bring. You saw it in the first round by drafting Byron Murphy. Now, I thought they could have used that on an offensive lineman because of how they performed last year as a unit, and they also lost one of their best offensive linemen in Damian Lewis when he signed with the Carolina Panthers. But again, that defensive identity, trying to be strong on that side. Mike Macdonald drafts Byron Murphy, who isn't a bad pick, but I probably would have been a little bit more comfortable if they went offensive lineman. But regardless, Byron Murphy is going to be a good player for them, trying to establish right away that defensive identity. And also, they restructured Geno Smith's deal, so probably keeping him for the remainder of his contract, just letting it play out. And that's probably the safest move for them. You can't really hate on it too much, but you can't overly love it because, again, I think they've reached the ceiling with Geno. He's not awful, but they've been 500. I think they had the exact same record for the last 2 seasons. I don't think they're going to get that much better than that, quite honestly, with him as their quarterback. So in this time that, there's not too much expectations on them, they could find other ways to get better, developing a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Kenneth Walker has shown those flashes, but I think he still needs to take that next step. DK Metcalf, seeing where he is, see if you can get more out of him, having a real impressive season as a number one receiver, and also some exciting players on defense like Devin Witherspoon and some of those guys like that. How that all plays out and how that defense looks now in 2024 will certainly be interesting for them. They're a little tight on cap space as it stands, so that could also be holding them back in making some big splash signings in free agency this year. But I like the addition of Jerome Baker to that defensive side of the ball after they moved on from Bobby Wagner. They re-signed Leonard Williams at $21.5 million per year. That didn't rub too many people the right way, but he was a massive piece. By re-signing him to that, they couldn't really be in play for somebody much better than what he could give you, so they kind of had to give in to that price. But he's not a bad player by any means. I think he could still provide something solid for them to get some production out of that defensive line. But overall, the Seattle Seahawks just brought back some of the main players that they had, Geno, Leonard Williams, and some of these guys didn't get too much better. I don't expect them to make any massive jumps from, I think they were 9-8 last year, to say something crazy like having only 5 to 6 losses. They're probably going to be around the same. So C+, doing above average, just getting everybody back, seemed fair to me with this grade. Then the next team, probably the one I loved, not just in this division, but in the entire NFL, I loved what the Rams did. I really did in this offseason. They had a great draft. Their first 4 to 3 picks were home runs for me. They got a good amount of signings also in free agency, like bringing in Tre'Davious White. Jonah Jackson's going to be massive for their offensive line from the Detroit Lions. Being able to re-sign Kevin Dotson, a little bit shaky in Pittsburgh, but once he got to Los Angeles, he was arguably one of their best offensive linemen since he's been there. Then you add to your defense in Darius Williams from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You bring over that man that you see on your screen there, bottom left, in Cameron Curl at the safety position. You also signed some other players to make some better additions to this team to just reinforce it a little bit more. But sticking to the draft some more and really talking about that, drafting Gerard Verse, there were some rumors. I talked about it actually, how they were trying to trade up for maybe a Brock Bowers, and then obviously looking at Byron Murphy. But I don't like saying they settled for Gerard Verse because I feel like that's a little disrespectful. But they got him. They added to a position of need on defensive line after the retirement of Aaron Donald. I like that move. And then in the second round, you add on to that, not just with another defensive lineman, but coming from the same school in Florida State, a partner basically playing right next to Gerard Verse all of their college careers. Gerard Verse, you bring in Braden Fisk as well. I love that, not just for the sentimental feeling, because I think that's really cool also, but Braden Fisk really improved or really impressed in the combine and then through his pre-draft workouts and all that. I loved him. I thought he was one of the biggest risers, and to get him second round early on, I love that pick for them. Also, Blake Corum, great season, or great career, I should say, at Michigan to add to Kyren Williams, and I was a massive fan of Kyren Williams last year as well. Now to have those two guys in your backfield just constantly, relentlessly running at teams if they wanted to, that just shows great potential with the Rams and this offensive line that got a lot better. The only thing you could really question right now is that contract situation with Matthew Stafford. He is, or has been known to want a more secure contract, some more guaranteed money at 36 years old. Nothing has really been advancing up until this point. There has been discussions, but outside of that, that is really my only gripe with them. I think a B+ is fair. It might be underselling them a little bit just because I have really been a big fan of them. I thought they got better all over their roster on offense and on defense, with Puka having another year under him, Cooper Kupp being healthy this offseason, the offensive line getting better. On the defensive side of the ball, you have some great young players in Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Then you add some more great young players in this draft and through free agency. I like what they did. They probably got better. They improved the most out of all these teams, and B plus seemed fair to me for their offseason in 2024. Before I wrap it up with the 49ers, I stuck with a B, kind of just in the middle. They were able to bring back some players, or actually not bring back some players. They actually let go of some players, but they were able to replace them with others to almost offset it a little bit. The biggest loss for them was Arik Armstead, though, as you see there on your screen. He was a massive loss just because he was the longest tenured 49er, very comfortable there, a very established piece and a very impactful piece for the 49ers, but because of salary cap reasons, they had to let him go. Sebastian Joseph Day and Javon Kinlaw all moved on in free agency, but they were able to bring in guys like a Leonard Floyd, a Yetur Gross-Matos, Malik Collins, linebacker Devondre Campbell from the Green Bay Packers. So it almost offsets other than Arik Armstead because he was phenomenal at what he did. So it isn't too much of a loss if they were able to bring in some of those guys to replace them. Also, moving on from Randy Gregory, Chase Young, and Cleveland Farrell. The only one that really made a giant impact was Chase Young, I believed, towards the later part of the season into the playoffs. But again, I think they have enough depth there to really not be too affected by it. Their defense is still going to be great, led there by Fred Warner. When Drake Greenlaw comes back, when and how long he will be out, will be something to monitor. But like I mentioned, bringing in Devondre Campbell shouldn't be a massive drop-off at all for this defense. And again, their biggest issue, their biggest question mark so far has been Brandon Ayuk. Will they extend him? Will they be satisfied with just drafting Ricky Pearsall, bringing back Juwan Jennings, and running it with that group led by Deebo Samuel and George Kittle? Or will they finally agree to a contract extension to keep Brandon Ayuk? Will they overpay for him? Will Brandon Ayuk settle for less money? That is still a massive storyline throughout this entire offseason. So that's why I really couldn't put the 49ers any higher, but they didn't really do too much to affect their stock. They're probably still the best team in the NFC for how consistent they are and how stacked really they are all over the field. But I thought B was enough to give them a grade to where they didn't really lose too much. They replaced everything that they lost, and they kept their big players, re-signing Christian McCaffrey and Juwan Jennings. Just Brandon Ayuk will still remain the biggest question mark for them, but those are my grades in the NFC West. Closing out the NFC before I jump into the AFC starting tomorrow on tomorrow's show. Let me know what you guys think of the grades I gave, and if you disagree or hate some of them, love some of them, please let me know in the chat box or in the comment section after this show has gone off the air. But that being said, we're going to move on with the rest of the show. We're going to go into another break, but when we return, we're going to talk about a discussion that I saw by Trey McBride, a Cardinals player, threw out the idea out there into the universe about Kyler Murray potentially being in MVP talks this season. He's had a healthy offseason for the first time in a while. Can he be in those conversations? Is he capable of doing that? And where does he currently rank among some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL? We're going to get into all of that when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast and diving into a pretty big discussion, a significant one, I think, for Kyler Murray and his chances of winning the MVP. Probably not something you thought you'd hear on today's show or really anywhere in the sports world around the NFL. But it was brought up, and I thought it was interesting to really dive into it and bring up both sides and see where we come out as a result to this conversation. But to give some context and where Kyler Murray can sort of start his MVP campaign potentially, we'd have to start with their offensive coordinator. Arizona hired a new offensive coordinator back with Jonathan Gannon at the beginning of last season by hiring Drew Petzing. He came in last year, like I mentioned, with Jonathan Gannon, but didn't have Kyler Murray at the start of it. Didn't have him to integrate his system, go over the ideas that you'd obviously want to do with your franchise quarterback. He was deprived of that because Kyler Murray missed all of last offseason and the first half of the regular season with the ACL rehab that he was going through. And through that entire process, when he did finally come back, he was still himself, but you didn't really feel like a sense of reliability, comfortability in that system because you can't learn it halfway through the system. It's just impossible. So this year is finally the first offseason that he is learning this new system, getting comfortable with it, really having command of everything to do with Drew Petzing's offensive scheme. And a big component of that is going to be Trey McBride, the standout tight end last year for the Arizona Cardinals. He has already talked about Kyler Murray and how he has seen a little bit of a different version of Kyler this year by saying he seems more motivated than ever. He continued, "This is the most confident I've seen him. This is the first year I've been fully healthy with him. He's fully healthy. I think everything is trending in the right way. He has a ton of weapons out there, and I have full confidence that he's capable of an MVP season." Clearly, Arizona had to be in some sort of the same mindset because they did give him a 5-year, $230 million deal a couple of years ago. Right now, he has been leapfrogged a couple of times because he makes $46 million per year, and the highest paid quarterback now almost makes $10 million more than what Kyler Murray got, but he is still right in the middle of that extension that he received from the Cardinals, and they wouldn't have given him a lot of money, a lot of guaranteed money at the time if they didn't have some sort of belief that he can at least get better. And along those lines of getting better, I think this MVP conversation is brought up, with Trey McBride now saying it and looking at what Kyler Murray has done. I thought I'd bring it up and maybe make a case for either side. You look so far through 5 to 4 years that Kyler Murray has been in the league, hasn't, in a lot of people's minds, made that major jump. When you're talking about talented quarterbacks, the guys that change games, the catalysts, the X factors in a lot of games to determining a win or a loss, Kyler Murray's name doesn't really pop up that much. And does that have to do more so with his team or more so with just him overall? I wanted to look at it, over the first 4 years of his career. It's been almost 4 years, since his best year as a professional in 2020. And in that year, we saw almost what I think could be the absolute peak of Kyler Murray's powers, because in 2020, he posted almost 4,000 passing yards, just 29 yards short of that. He had 819 rushing yards in that year, 11 rushing touchdowns, and 26 passing touchdowns as well, to go along with only 10 interceptions, which is not an awful ratio at all. But he didn't make the postseason. He made the postseason the following year in 2021, but lost to the Los Angeles Rams. And you look at those numbers, obviously very impressive in my opinion. In 2020, arguably his best year of his career. But in terms of stats, he has never been any higher than 10th through 13th ranked in any of those categories in passing yards, passing touchdowns, or anything like that. And his record as a team with the Arizona Cardinals since he has been in the NFL hasn't been too great either. In 2019, they were 5-10-1. In 2020, his best career year, they were only 8-8. Then in 2021, when they did make the playoffs, they finished second in the NFC West, and they had an 11-6 record, but again, they lost in the first round. Then you look at 2022, and they were 4-13, and they repeated that exact same record this past year in 2023, 4-13 again. So you look at those records, you look at the numbers and where they stack up against other quarterbacks. From that point of view, this conversation really doesn't hold any merit for Kyler Murray to be capable of winning that MVP. But I wanted to throw it out there because just giving you guys some thoughts on why that could be. Why hasn't he really been in those conversations? Is he capable of winning it? I think it's different than just saying, will he win one? Will he win one with how talented this quarterback pool is right now? It is most likely that he will not win one because that is a big ask, especially where the Cardinals are at this point in their development. And I think that's the biggest point of it because if you look of the surrounding players around them, his best teams were probably in 2020 and in 2021. And those teams, again, weren't world beaters, weren't historical in any way, didn't have too many great game-changing players around them, but they still were impressive, around 500 and then 11-6 in 2021. But since then, the surrounding cast around him hasn't been too great. He's been asked to do a lot, I believe, from watching some of the games, from watching just some of Kyler Murray. I believe that he's been tasked with doing a lot more to determine a win or a loss than a lot of other quarterbacks because, quite frankly, a lot of other organizations handle this entire situation of a young quarterback coming in, being the face of a franchise, a lot better than what the Cardinals have handled it as. I keep going back to the Houston Texans, the Cincinnati Bengals to an extent as well, by drafting Jamar Chase and just drafting a ton of weapons for Joe Burrow. Justin Herbert also, when he came into the league and how just special he was right off the bat with all those talented players around him, that's the kind of situation that really produces some of these outstanding performances so early on by these quarterbacks. And I don't think Kyler really ever got that. And not to just release him from any, I guess, sort of blame from improving this team. He has certainly played a part in that. But I feel like we haven't really seen the best version of Kyler Murray. I don't think I'll ever be content in saying that until I see a very, competitive team around him. Until I see the Cardinals surround him with the best situation that I think he's ever had, arguably, and that's not a high bar at all with how good this team has been around Kyler. I don't feel comfortable in saying that he isn't capable of winning the MVP. And as a team, since 2020 and 2021, which were arguably his best teams around him, they only really got worse, and now we're starting to see a turning of the corner with Jonathan Gannon coming in, drafting Marvin Harrison, James Conner there as well. Hopefully this is a turning point for them, and then I can make a better determination of this argument, but also you look more deeper into some of these stats and some of the production that we've seen from Kyler Murray. He's thrown for over 37 yards every year he's played over 14 games, and the size of him, his frame, is always going to be a major talking point, but in terms of talent, throwing the ball, these guys that come from a baseball background and are talented in that way, I really am fascinated by it because at his height, similar to Russell Wilson and some of the other quarterbacks, similar of his stature, I think Kyler is still very good of ball placement, accuracy a lot of the times with changing the angle of his throw, manipulating some of the defenses, and just getting out of pressure and getting out of trouble just himself based on talent. I think his talent supersedes any hurdle that comes in his way because of that size thing, and that is a concern when you're talking about injuries, but I think the talent supersedes that, and he's always been in the conversation in terms of quarterbacks, and also talking about ranking him where he ranks as of right now, just on talent alone and who you would rather have, I guess, to start a team. He would probably still fall outside of the top 10. I won't name them all right now, but I think it's a safe bet to say he's definitely not in the top 8. You can make an argument for top 10, maybe, at that 10th spot, but I think he falls comfortably around 11 through 13, or at 12 potentially. But again, I won't rank all the quarterbacks I could take above him, but there is a good amount. The level of quarterbacking at this stage of the NFL where we find ourselves right now is very, very good, and I think a lot of teams just overall have a better situation than Kyler Murray. So to say he's incapable of winning an MVP is a little bit, just of an overreaction. I think he can be capable. I like some of the pieces that the Cardinals have added around him, but until they get a little bit better, and the fact that Trey McBride brought it up, I didn't think it was too crazy. Some people might look at that statement and really not like it and think that there's no chance ever that Kyler Murray could be an MVP candidate, but from what I've seen in terms of talent, a different dynamic with the running game, and just his arm talent, just overall. His overall talent is one thing, but his arm capabilities and his arm strength and how he changes the angles of his throws, you can't find that anywhere. I think he's done a lot better with a lot less than some of these other quarterbacks that are being compared to him. But I hopefully for him and the Cardinals, he gets better, or the team gets better around him, and then we could really get a real gauge of what Kyler Murray could truly be in this league once he gets a better team around him, because that obviously matters. No matter how talented your quarterback is, you need players to catch his passes, guys to protect in front of him. The Cardinals really haven't had that up until 2021, so hopefully they find that. I think they will under Jonathan Gannon, but it is a long process to go through. But for right now, he is capable of winning an MVP. Will he do it? It doesn't look likely right now with the team around him, but we shall see. But we're going to put a pin in that conversation and keep going with the rest of the show. Two more topics to get to on today's episode. Talking some more about the New England Patriots, the new offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt. How is he implementing a new strategy on offense to really get the best out of Drake May? We're going to talk about that, and the Jaguars getting the approval from the City Council of Jacksonville to go ahead and renovate their new stadium that is set to be finished in 2028. What went into the details on that and who is paying what are all going to be discussed in just a few moments. We'll be right back after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to give some more love to the New England Patriots, talking some more about their offense and what to expect out of them, what to look for on offense, and how that could help Drake May in his first year in the NFL. But to start on that, to find some sort of positive that we can look towards to get Drake May to that superstar level, we have to look at the new offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, for the New England Patriots. He was hired back in February from the Cleveland Browns, and once they hired him, there was no surprise as to why they signed Jacoby Brissett. Not only did he play for the New England Patriots, but also he played under Van Pelt with the Cleveland Browns in 2022. So there is good reason why Jacoby Brissett right now is penciled in to start right away, but the idea of this entire project with bringing in Drake May or starting this new era outside of Bill Belichick is to get that guy, number 10, Drake May, who they drafted at number 3 overall, get him to be the starter eventually, get him to be the leader of this new era for the New England Patriots. And he's definitely not ready right now. That's why they brought in Jacoby Brissett, comfortable in the New England Patriots, comfortable with Alex Van Pelt and knowing his system already. You have him there for a good, I would say, year before Drake May is really expected to at least compete with Brissett to start in New England. But right now, talking about Alex Van Pelt and really zoning in on him and what he could do to help Drake May, former New England safety Duron Harmon touched on this situation because he was familiar with Alex Van Pelt, working close with him during his time in Cleveland, and he believes that Alex Van Pelt can really help Drake May, and he'll be one of the probably the most important piece to Drake May's development early on in his career. Duron Harmon praised Van Pelt's organization, game planning, and just getting guys ready to play each week. And he touched on a staple of Alex Van Pelt's offensive scheme is running the ball. obviously, because you saw how prolific the Cleveland Browns were in this category last year with Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and that offensive line. And it was just absurd watching it because I'm a Steelers fan, so watching a lot of those Browns games, and if Deshaun Watson was having a bad game or they just weren't getting anything going, that offensive line, that running game with Nick Chubb was almost as close as you could get to unstoppable. Nick Chubb was probably on his way to another 1,000-yard year if he didn't get hurt, but unfortunately he did. But I think the New England Patriots really got a good piece here in Van Pelt to help out this specific situation with Drake May, because Van Pelt is really zoned in on wanting to run the ball, and there's no better pressure alleviator than having a very dominant run game. More specifically, the wide zone runs that Alex Van Pelt wants to integrate into this team and into this New England Patriots team to help out Drake May. And not just Drake May, but Jacoby Brissett as well, making sure he's successful with the lack of skill-based players around them, with the lack of excitement from the wide receiver position, from the offensive line a little bit as well. The expectations are low for the Patriots, but with Alex Van Pelt, I think the way he wants to run his offense will be intriguing for them to alleviate some pressure and not have to win the game throwing the ball 30 to 40 times like most other teams do. New England already re-signed Ramondre Stevenson to a 4-year, $36 million deal, so he's their guy going forward. He's going to be almost the face of this running game, and through his time in New England, through splitting carries with Ezekiel Elliott and Damian Harris, I think he has mostly stood out as the prominent running back, the one that gets you off your feet the most, the one that really becomes productive. I think his yards per carry in some of his best years were 4 or maybe even 5 yards per carry, and how efficient he was in getting those extra yards. And maybe the New England Patriots weren't the old New England Patriots, but he certainly didn't contribute to them faltering in any way. And off of the back of that, it falls right in line of that game plan to use the running game to help the young quarterbacks, this offense, and especially just the Patriots overall, to not be so uptight a lot of games. If the passing game's not working, they always have that running game to lean back on, and slowing the game down, keeping it close to where you're not in a shootout and you don't have to rely on passing the ball, like I mentioned, having these superstar players all over the field, almost making it easy to throw the ball more so than not. But the Patriots are doing it a little bit of a different way, and it's almost similar to the Los Angeles Chargers by bringing up that point, with 2 or 3 teams in the AFC West, with the Chargers just being high-powered offenses and high-powered passing games, like the Las Vegas Raiders have Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers now, Michael Mayer as well. The quarterback's a little dodgy, but still a lot of pass-catching options that make them a dynamic offense. Then you obviously have the Chiefs. And outside of that, those are 2 teams there in the AFC West. And now you look over here to the AFC East, and you have the Jets, Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams coming in, Breece Hall also there. High-powered, exciting, pass-catching options. Then you look at the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, one of the best arms in the entire NFL, Keon Coleman, I'm forgetting the name. I mean, they brought in different guys. They have Dalton Kincaid there, Dawson Knox. They brought in Curtis Samuel. Some of these guys, still a high-powered offense with, I would probably say, more exciting, better options than what the Patriots have. So what do you do to sort of combat that and complement what you are working with? You go to the running game. And like the Los Angeles Chargers and what Jim Harbaugh is doing, they're doing it a little bit different than the rest of the teams in their division. They're building up the offensive line. They're trying to get an established running game with what he's bringing over from his Michigan days. Now Alex Van Pelt is charged with doing the same thing here in New England. And I think it's an exciting way of doing it. It's not so monotone where it's just high scoring, 28 to 35 games, over 30 points for each team. Those type of games, yeah, they're exciting here and there, but I don't know if it's just me. It probably is just me falling in this small category of fans, but I love seeing some good defensive games, some low-scoring games where the defenses are just locked in. They know what's coming, and you can't do anything to stop it. So it's a good way to combat that. Everybody always says styles make fights, and having such different approaches to the game in a way and still being close, I think makes for a more entertaining game, in my opinion. And Alex Van Pelt doing this with Drake May can only make him better. I don't think Drake May should start any earlier than November, in my opinion, this year at the earliest. But based on the state of the team, everyone is basically new at where they are with the Patriots. You got a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new players coming in, a rookie quarterback also newly coming in as well. It feels like this year is just a feel-it-out year. They're probably not going to have a winning record, but next year, with everybody having a higher level of understanding of what this offense, what this defense, what this team, their identity is in general, I think then it should be a better environment for Drake May to come in and be that starter, with Alex Van Pelt having a whole new year of learning this system, really becoming comfortable and knowing it like the back of your hand. Having that strategy and going about it this way with the running game can only really help Drake May and this offense. This is a long-term project. I want to stress that to everybody that's watching and has an understanding of what the Patriots are going through. It's not going to be just a flip of one year to the next like the Houston Texans. That's very much an anomaly sort of a situation. Not very few teams ever have had that quick of a turnaround. You have to be very fortunate in that department, but it's not like this way can't work. The Patriots just have to do it a slower, more grinded way, and I think they're built for it. I love the addition of Alex Van Pelt. Drake May seems to be a very much a fan favorite in New England, so it's gonna take a while for sure. But with Ramondre Stevenson there as their premier back, and through these years, these next 2 to 3 years, if they could find a good pass-catching option like I also think the Chargers should do, they're really going to be a team you don't want to face, if that makes sense. You don't want to face the team that wants to run it down your throat about 20-plus times a game. None of those games are fun for opposing defenses. They hurt. You're always sore after it, at least from what I hear. I don't play football, so it seems like you don't want to play those teams. The Patriots, if they built that sort of roster, could find earlier success than maybe originally anticipated, but they're on the right path. I think with this strategy, they're going to get the best out of Drake May if they continue and really buy into this long-term project with Drake May and this offense. But in saying that, we're going to leave that topic there, and when we return for our final segment, we're going to talk about another approval for a new stadium coming in the near future in 2028 with the Jacksonville Jaguars this time. What went into it, how much is getting paid to renovate this stadium, and how could it potentially look when it's all said and done. I'll get into all those details when we return. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Back here now for the final segment on today's show, and like yesterday's last segment, talking about the Carolina Panthers and their new stadium renovation that got also approved by their city council. The same thing happened with the Jacksonville Jaguars a day later this week. On Tuesday night, the Jacksonville City Council voted in favor of the renovations to the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. 14-1 was the final vote count. to approve the agreement between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the city for a $1.4 billion renovation plan to Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville, Florida. So a lot more convincing than the 7-3 vote in Charlotte, North Carolina. Not too much of a discussion to go into this, whether to renovate it or not. But some more details on this plan going on by the Jaguars and the city of Jacksonville. $775 million are going towards the renovations that will come from public funds. And also the city overall will pay for more than half of the entire project, over half of that $1.4 billion that is going into the entire renovation plan. The Jacksonville Jaguars are responsible for the other $625, but with that, there is some more to tag along with that for what the Jacksonville Jaguars will have to invest into this project. They will also be paying the city of Jacksonville a base rent of $1 million per year for the next for the next 30 years, I think is how long their new lease is. So a $1 million per year rent will be going towards the city. According to the Jacksonville Daily Record, though, this deal now is the largest single capital project in Jacksonville's history. With that 30-year lease, it also comes along with that too. So for the next 3 decades, the Jacksonville Jaguars will be in Jacksonville. And I think this is the right move. There was a little bit of doubt and just some debate about the renovations to not Jacksonville, to Charlotte's renovations to the Panther Stadium because of their bad relationship with their owner, David Tepper, and arguing that he should be paying more towards their project. But there doesn't seem to be any ill feelings towards the Jags owner and their organization on anything that they've done in the past or anything that the city doesn't align itself with. So they all seem to be in good spirits about this, having the Jaguars in Jacksonville. I know there was those rumors, those talks about them maybe being a London-based team or the NFL just having a team there overall. There was just some rumors about the Jaguars being that team, but now that is all out the window. You can forget about that. They're going to be in Jacksonville for the next 3 decades. And speaking of their owner and their organization and how it's run, the Jaguars owner, Shad Khan, who is worth $12 billion, by the way, is also responsible for the cost of overruns of the renovation, and also 80% of the game day expenses will also be charged to Shad Khan. So that is another thing that the Jaguars will have to be responsible for if, the city is paying for over half of it. These other little things should be going towards the Jaguars. I think that's a fair trade-off, and why we probably got that 14-1 final vote in the end. Like I mentioned, this follows the Carolina Panthers City Council also approving their renovation on Monday night. This approval happened on Tuesday night, and now both stadiums that ironically opened around the same time in 1995 and in 1996, the oldest stadiums overall, both of them in the NFL. So this was a long time coming in 2 cities where maybe not too much else is going on in terms of sports. You have Charlotte FC in Carolina. You have the Carolina Panthers, but not the Charlotte Hornets, but not too much outside of that. So potentially losing one of these teams in either city was definitely going to be the worst thing that could happen. The way that they agreed to these deals, I know there's massive numbers to go into it. I mentioned $800 million for the Panthers yesterday, and now it's $1.4 billion for Jacksonville. It seems like a lot, and people might think, is it worth it, to keep them there? It's 100% worth it. These cities need to have this level of attraction at their areas, at their location, and it's going to be massive because not only does it bring in a lot of people because you have a new stadium there, obviously, but the Jaguars are in a good spot right now where they are definitely trending up. I know I've been almost on the negative side more so than not on the deal given to Trevor Lawrence and how much the Jaguars paid for them, but you can't argue with the fact that they are getting better. They are definitely in a better spot than the Carolina Panthers, so you have that potential there, a new stadium coming in, and by the time 2028 rolls around, where these plans to renovate it should conclude, you would hope that the Jaguars are in a very good spot, contending for AFC championships, contending for Super Bowls. Hopefully, that's the ultimate goal. You get a new stadium coming in. It should bring new life to this city, and that's always a great thing, to bring in some revenue to those cities as well. And the absolute last hurdle, although, to finally get the absolute final check mark on this entire thing, we'll be getting 24 of the 32 owners' votes to approve the final go-ahead for the renovations to go through. That will take place at the league's meeting in October, so we're going to have to wait until October for the construction to actually begin. But I don't see why there would be a problem with this. Usually these get accepted more often than not. 24 out of 32 does seem a little high, but again, I don't see why this would be held up at the owners' meeting. We're just going to have to wait a little bit longer for that to get going. And once it does get going, like I anticipated, the construction is scheduled to start after the team's 2025 season and will conclude in 2028. But once it's finished, the sources around this entire situation say that it will look sort of similar to the SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, and how beautiful that is. You only hope that it does live up to those standards, and it looks very much like that. But it is an idea of what it could look like. You guys can find those pictures on social media of what it's supposed to look like. And it is exciting because to look like SoFi and have the entire seated areas with a shaded canopy can only help anybody that goes to these games with how hot it gets in Jacksonville. But overall, it's a great thing for the city of Jacksonville and the Jacksonville Jaguars as a whole as well, on a footballing standpoint, to get renovations to their stadium, renovations to their training facilities, and all of that sort of complex around the stadium and that area. It's going to be great. The Jaguars are in a good place right now in terms of building their team. I love Doug Peterson as their head coach. Trevor Lawrence, say what you want about that contract. He has proven to the Jaguars, at least, that he could be their franchise quarterback. So you can only hope that that works out for them. I have my doubts right now, but I'd love for them to prove me wrong and for this to be a glowing, booming city in a few years from now. And with a new stadium, having the same level of success on the field should be something that the Jaguars are aiming for. They're in a good spot right now, but a lot could happen from now until 2028. But that is the latest on the Jaguars and getting the approval from the Jacksonville City Council on these renovations. And with that being said, that'll do it for today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's show. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And also, if you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel for more NFL topics, but in different forms of media. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and football conversations around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me. I hope you guys are all back here again to close out the week with me tomorrow on Friday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.